what first drew you to automobiles? I read a great story about you and your brother being hired to park cars, and once you got in one and fired it up, you were kind of hooked.
Well, yeah, it's something close to that. I think we were living in Lucca in Tuscany at the time, and there was a square. There was a garage where they did repairs, but also parking, because Lucca is a medieval city surrounded by walls, but it's very upscale, a lot of stores. So there were a lot of merchants, and parking was at a premium. So anyway, they used to park a lot of cars for some of the individuals that had their stores there, and some high-end cars as well. But Aldo and I, my twin brother Aldo and I, used to hang out there. We didn't get hired or anything, we just hung out there, and they got to like us, and we were about 13 years old, and
wow.
And so then they said put us in some of the smaller cars, the Fiat Topolino they call it, and because easier to reach the pedals and all that. And then they moved us up to the bigger cars, the Alfa Romeo and so forth. And the owner used to do some burnouts with the customer cars, So, of course, that's what we started doing as well. That's what, whenever I valet my car now, I wonder if they treat it like I used to treat the customers' cars.
Now, up until that point, had you driven anything at all up to that point?
No. The family didn't even own a car at the time. This was just almost post-war, and we were actually refugees there, because we left our land where I was born because it became part of Yugoslavia, hardline communism, and so we immigrated, and my dad, we left everything behind, and we were basically refugees in our own country before we came to the States. But the love for the sport really began there, quite honestly. Motor racing being so prominent in Italy, especially in the early 50s, as you can imagine, when Formula One started officially, and then you had Ferrari, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, as the big protagonist in that side. And so, and that's it. We gravitated to that as kids. And then current world champion at the time was a driver by the name of Alberto Ascari, and he became my absolute idol. That's who I wanted to emulate. And a year before we arrived to the States, this garage owners took us to the Italian Grand Prix in Monza, near Milan. And we saw firsthand our idol, Alberto Ascari, drive and fight against the Fangio and Moss with the Mercedes cars and all that. And so anyway, at that point, I always say that the mold was cast at that point. We wanted to be race drivers. And when we when we came to the States in 55, we soon found out, actually, we arrived in June. And so it was a full season on in racing. And there was a racetrack here in Nazareth. And that's when we discovered the modified stock cars. 2 years later, Aldo and I and 4 other buddies started building a car to race it locally. And we started racing at age 1959. That's when my career started, basically, and I never looked back. Throughout my last race was at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2000.
Now, who got the idea to go racing first, you or Aldo, or was that kind of a team effort right from the start?
Oh yeah, we were all one. Just thinking the same way, and we sort of we kind of boosted up one another, and said, we can do this, and all that. And so that's the reason why we got started. We built one car, two drivers, but that's how it all started for us. And I'll tell you, I got to tell you this as well, that we built a Hudson Hornet, and we got the information from the Marshall team at the time.
Wow.
Who was a factory team, and we paid $500 for that information. In fact, I think it's in this book, and in the book that I wrote about that team, and we built something that really worked, and that's why Aldo and I we both won our very first race that we had competed in. And anyway, we were underage legally. We were 19. You had to be 21 to race legally in those days, but we had a local gentleman. He was editor of the Nazareth Key, the newspaper here, and we asked him to do a decent job on changing on our license, changing the birth date. And also the thing also, we also even look pretty young, even for our age. Yeah. And there was a question, where'd you have the experience? Is this their first? No. So we raced in Italy. I mean, this was a big baloney, we raced in Italy. And that one stuck with us. As a matter of fact, you remember Chris Economaki?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yes, I do.
Economaki ran with that story almost until the end for years and years. And I could tell, I said, Chris, it's not true. But there was still that story stayed on that we raced Formula Junior in Italy when we were 15 and 16, where we were already here in America.
Well, Mario, you never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
The axiom is, if you know the man and the man is a legend, print the legend. Well, given that you got off to a really, really good start with the victories apiece, was racing harder or easier than you expected, or pretty much the same?
Well, we didn't know what to expect, basically, as you can imagine. But at the same time, I think we were driven by so much love and passion to do it, and you find a way. And luckily, as I said, we did a better job than I thought, even on the car. And yeah, we won the first race that we competed in. Aldo and I did. He won the toss for the first one, so I was actually happy but he won the heat and the main event, and I couldn't believe my eyes. But after we did that, we did all the normal thing. We did the crashing, the winning, and overall, though, it was a very, very productive season, no question, our first season, except for the last race of the season. That's where Aldo got hurt, and basically it ultimately determined his career, really. But he had a terrible mishap in Hatfield, Pennsylvania. The last race was an invitational race, and he had a head injury there. In fact, they gave him his last rites that night.
No kidding.
Wow. Yeah, he was in a coma for a long time. Then he took a sabbatical, and then he raced for 10 more years. But it's he paid the price, on that accident, and unfortunately.
Now, what kind of impact did that accident, your brother's accident, have on you personally? You said that you never looked back, but still, that's your twin brother. What kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, obviously it wasn't easy, because I knew that how much he wanted what I did. We were on the same path, and seeing that all of a sudden he's got a roadblock, so to speak, but it's his attitude, I think, that gave me courage, because he never never felt sorry for himself, or never, even right from the very beginning, figure, well, this is the way it is and all that, never elaborated on it, quite honestly. And never accepted the fact that maybe it's going to hamper, his progress. I figure he's just going to go for it. And throughout his life alongside of me, never, ever, and I almost sometimes felt guilty, I said, why did this happen to him and not to me? But he never made me feel that way. Now, because of that, it took my mind away from what the hell? Why are we doing this for? This can be pretty lethal, But here again, if you're going to keep doing it, I think I was just driven by too much passion, to be swayed in any other way, quite honestly. And you just don't dwell on it. I said this always, if you dwell on it, then you just don't belong in the business. But it does affect you. I mean, along the ways, when you're talking about, the 60s, 70s, and those were terrible decades as far as, the mortality rate, in our sport. We know that only too well. As rewarding as a sport could always be, it was as cruel as it could possibly be at the time, because we just didn't have the safety in place. It was just a work in progress, if you will. But we went through the pains, in those days. And again, you had to, it's strange that just a couple of days ago was AJ Foyt's birthday, and we call each other on our birthday, just to chat a little bit. And the first thing he says, man, I can't believe that we're still standing, because we lost so many of our buddies, along the way, not just because of age, but also, so many friends that were, our competition, our rivals, So we know how fortunate we've been, obviously, to be able to survive through those decades.
Well, through this early years of your racing and Aldo's, what was your parents' reaction to all of this?
I knew you had to bring that up. Well, my dad was obviously not a race fan, for whatever reason, I just never captured him. But he knew about the fatality. He knew about the negatives of the sport. So as kids, you always express yourself. I want to be a race driver. You go, yeah, type of thing. But when things got serious, and believe it or not, we raced the whole first season without him knowing that we were racing locally. And I mean, and we were winning some races, so it was, it was in the local papers. But to our defense, it was a language barrier, because it took him a lot longer for him to learn English than us, But and so that was it. Basically, we were winning some races, and even the boss at work would say, "Hey, Gigi, well, your kids are really doing well." He had no idea what the guy was saying, so he thought that he was patting him in the back for his own work, But and how he discovered we were racing is when Aldo got hurt, the very last race of the season, when he was in the hospital, and he thought that in some ways he was vindicated, if you will, like we learned a lesson and all that, and what was helped, to pay when he found out that I resumed racing the following season. I started building a new car immediately. Aldo was still in the hospital. And so it took him a long time, it took him like a few years for him to realize that we were serious about it. And at first, he would ask Aldo, "How's Mario doing?" And then he would ask me, "How's Aldo doing?" and all that. And then he became the biggest fan, as you can imagine. Big supporter.
You were racing there at Nazareth and in that area. Was there ever a chance in those early days that you would pursue NASCAR as a career, or were you pretty much always focused on running open wheel?
Well, you see, my passion began with open wheel, with the Formula. And that's why the best way to get started was obviously to be with NASCAR. I mean, with NASCAR, with the stock car, on the local level, dirt tracks. That was very popular. There were, 5 or 6 tracks within 150-mile radius, that you could race. We were racing like 3 times a week. And so, again, it was very popular. So to get started, that's it. But my objective immediately was when I came out of that stock car to get into midgets. And we got into, I started driving in winter, the 3/4 midget, which at the time we know was very popular. We're running in Teaneck, New Jersey, Hempstead, Long Island, and so forth. And with the top midget drivers ever, like Len Duncan, Tony Bonadias, Tony Rahman. These are all icons of midget racing, and to race against them, was really a great opportunity for me, which launched me to full-size midgets, because in my first year there, I won the biggest race, which was the 100-lapper in Teaneck. And Len Duncan finished second to me, who was the guy. And so they earned me a ride into a full-size midget, and that's it. So it was midget sprint cars, and then, champ cars. And then because of my relation with Ford, which started in 1965, because we had the Ford engine at Indy with a new double overhead cam engine. And then, of course, looking at my rivals like AJ Foyt, and then you look at Dan Gurney driving stock cars, rode, Riverside or whatever, and winning with the Woods Brothers cars, and then Pernelli Jones. Watching those guys do it, I figure, you know what, I like to do that. I like to try that. So that's how I got involved in it. And the best part is that I was able to do it with some top teams and so forth. I had not a very good time with Smokey Yunick, my first experience in '66 at that time, because he was experimenting with setups. He wanted me because he knew that I was new. I was not established there. So he wanted to try some, the guy was really always thinking outside the box, and he was trying some weird setups on me that, on those banks, I felt like I was like on a pogo stick, the car just, it didn't feel like a race car until I got into Holman and Moody Ford, and I figured, oh, now this feels like a race car, and
Yeah.
And then, then things went well there.
What was it like working with Smokey? Because from what I understand, he could be both very cantankerous and also very secretive about his race cars.
Oh, you talk about secretive. That's one thing that when I, he called me, and I agreed, to do Daytona. And then I said, when can I come down to get fitted in the car? Oh, you can't do that. You can't come to the garage. I said, what? How the heck am I going to reach the pedals? He said, don't worry. He said, the car will fit. It'll fit. He would not let me in the garage. There was, he had all of his secrets and whatever they were. And because I remember even, in those days, you had to have a certain ride height.
Yeah.
You had a minimum ride height. And then, he would drop the car. He had the spring blocks, and the spring to keep the car high. And, but then he had a lever, on this, he had some upholstery on the side of the car just for the heck with a pocket. And he says, kid, he said, when you go out there, as soon as you can pass the pit boxes, he says, you just reach in there and pull that thing as hard as you can. Because everybody, I remember there used to be rubber blocks all over the place, but he was smart. He had him on, he had him on, on the string, like, on the cable, I should say. So at least, they wouldn't drop on the track. Some of these guys, had them, they used to swerve the car and they lose the blocks, and then there'd be blocks all over the place. So that rule changed. But, you know, things like that, you know, he always had, he was interesting guy. Like you said, you know, you ask how he was as a character. I mean, you know, everybody loves Smokey, you know, but again, he had his way of doing things. And you could see that even in NASCAR, they all knew that he was cheating somewhere. And I think the story, remember that the one where they thought that he had an oversized, or no, he said fuel. No, he had fuel in his roll bars or something.
Yeah.
And they pulled, NASCAR pulled this tank out, and he got so mad that he jumped in the car and started and drove right out to the rig, you know, to load it up and go home with a fuel tank over with NASCAR in the garage. It was so funny, you know. But you know, the guy he was one of the real characters of our sport. You know, that he did phenomenal, obviously, in so many ways, because he was always thinking outside the box. I mean, always looking for that unfair advantage. And again, I'm just glad that I had that experience, even though it didn't turn out into, you know, a lot of results. But it was still great to have had the opportunity.
You also ran Daytona that summer for Cotton Owens. How important was that additional experience to what was going to take place in the 500 the following February?
Cotton was phenomenal. I tell you, you know, obviously he was, as a driver, he knew what was going on. And the one thing that really impressed me, I was running a Dodge Charger. In those days, the Dodge Charger, for some reason or other, you know, was very loose. And, you know, aerodynamically, it was fine. But, you know, they used to run very small spoilers. And he could tell. He could tell what the car was doing just watching me on the banking. And I would come in, because I didn't have the experience on the setups. So I would come in and he'd make adjustments. I mean, I was running good. I was in the front. I mean, running up front in that in July in that race, and then blew the engine. But I felt really good in the race. I felt like I was competitive, and I was so, again, you know, he gave me so much confidence because he just knew what he was doing. You know, Cotton was really good to me. Just too bad that I didn't continue with him, because the opportunity came to race with the Holman and Moody then the following year. And that's because of the affiliation with Ford, as I said before.
Now, I know that you ran the 24 hours of Le Mans with Holman Moody in 66 and 67, if I understand correctly. How did running the Daytona 500 for them come about? How did that relationship take place? Well,
basically through Ford, you know, and as you know, that they were the official Ford team, you know, so and it was easy to befriend John Holman and Ralph. You know, Ralph Moody was a real racer. And, you know, here again, we just struck a deal, and they put me alongside of Fred Lorenzen. You know, I felt that I had a good opportunity there. Didn't have the best engines, you know, in practice or qualifying, but the chassis seemed to be there, and then that's what brought me home.
Now, you evidently developed a pretty decent relationship with John Holman, and unfortunately today, not a lot of people remember him or recognize what he meant to the sport back in those days. Tell me about the John Holman that you knew.
But John was a great businessman. He just knew how to run the business side and surround himself with the best people as far as running the teams and so forth. But he was a great negotiator with Ford. He was in charge of things, and I think that's what made him successful. No question. I can say I had some issues with with the engines, because I wasn't quick enough during practice or the single lap qualifying, and because of that, I qualified with a very shallow spoiler, you know, which I was told, you know, oh man, you're gonna have tough time in the race and all that. But I couldn't help it. And then but nobody would tell me anything, you know, like I knew I had a 370 gear and but all, you know, everybody knew, and, you know, you had 370 gear should have been running at least 7,000, 7,200 RPM. And I was running like 6,800 RPM, you know, on a straightaway with no wind. And that was an issue. And the only guy that set me straight on that was Donnie Allison. Because I was asking questions, I said, and, you know, casually, you know, we're talking and he said, how you doing and all that. And because I started talking to the Allisons, you know, nice guys. I said, man, you got to come to Indy and all that. And, you know, that's how we were exchanging. And then he said, man, I said, man, I don't know what the car feels pretty good, but just not fast. And so we talked about a gear. So you should be turning. So then I went to John Holman and well, there was something else and it became a political thing. Anyway, I should not name the gentleman, the guy that was in charge of engines. But I know that just before the qualifiers, all the Ford engines were coming in, and then I asked the gentleman. I said, "Can I see the dyno sheets on those engines?" Yeah, he says they're all within like 5 horsepower, you know. So, you know, they're all tagged. They were tagged like, you know, Foyt. It was, you know, I said Killia, whatever. And then I just swapped a tag. And said, "Oh, you can't do that." I said, "What the hell? It's the same engine hookup and everything." So he said, "You can't do that." So I said, "Well, that answered my question." So then I went to John and I complained. I said, "Somehow I'm not getting the engines." And so he and so we got an engine from was Engine and Foundry, an experimental engine from Ford to put in a qualifier, and I was flying. I was flying with that, and so I said to John, I said, "John, I want to race that engine." He said, "No, you know," he says, "it'll never last." He says, "It's you probably blow up in, you know, 25, 30 laps." I said, "But at least I'll be in my glory. You know what I mean? I'll be up front." And so but he went out, you know who built my engine? He got Waddell Wilson. I only found this out.
Kidding.
Only a few years, I'm at 340. No, actually it was in 2017 when I was there for the 50th anniversary. That's when I found out for sure it was Waddell Wilson that built my engine. And he never got credit for it. And he built the race engine. I was scuffing tires faster than what Paul was. Curtis Turner was on pole, you know, at that time. And I think it was 181 and a half or something. And I was quicker than him, than Paul, scuffing tire because I had this small spoiler. But then it was a bit of hell to pay in the race, but at least I could lead, you know. And I mean, that engine that brought me home. And the car was neutral to loose, but it was a doable, you know. Sometimes in a loose car you can't really drive it for a long time, but this one I felt that I had the back end, except I was really in trouble following, you know, when I had a lot of cars around me. So I had to really try to go for the lead, and that's why I led, you know, 118 of 200 laps, you know, because in those days you wanted to draft because, you know, you were saving so much fuel because you know, the cars were not so aerodynamic. So, you know, you had a good, you know, it was tough going through the air, but when you're following, you could follow somebody on half throttle, you know, and save fuel. Well, and that was really what everybody was doing. But so I had to go in the front. I had to go in the lead and run high, make sure that nobody would get by me on the outside as possible. A couple of them did, you know, but I was just almost spinning, you know, in that direction, but in that situation. But other than that, though, I mean, I drove hard all day because I had to really stay on top of it. But it worked out.
Jake Elder was your crew chief for the 500.
Jake Elder.
What was your relationship? Yeah, what was your relationship with him?
Good guy. good guy, a real racer. I mean, Jake, he knew what he was doing, and he was helping me out a lot, and he knew so much more about setups and everything, and that's why the car, was right. It was mechanically, it was really correct. I think I could have used a little bigger spoiler. I think it would have been an easier ride for me. But other than that, though, Jake did his job, no question about it.
Steve, go ahead and ask about the pit stop, if you would.
You had to do that, didn't you?
Okay, tell us about the pit stop, Mario.
Well, the pit stop was we're coming in. It was actually that was our last fuel stop, and I was leading the race, and Freddie Lorenzo, my teammate, was running second, and we came in together, and all of a sudden they kept my car up on jacks, and Freddie just took off, let him out first, and that actually really upset me. I was, screaming, but there was no radios in those days, but they knew I was pissed, and so when they let it down, I was probably about 7 or 8 seconds behind him, even more, and I ran him down, and in those days, though, if my car was more comfortable, I would have stayed there and just drafted him until the end, because if you had somebody on your tail, if you're leading the last lap, you were not going to win. Not in those days, no way. And but because the way the squirrely as my car was, I went by him, then he stuck on me. I couldn't shake him. No how, because, the guy, he was a master anyway. So, and I was thinking, I said, oh, what am I going to do here? So I had no idea. So I said, well, we just, kept going. But it was, we were coming up to lap some cars, and it was Tiny Lund driving for Richard Petty, that number 42. And we're coming out of turn 2. And he's a gentleman, he pulled to the center of the track and he motioned me to go on the outside. And I came right up on him, and I dove on the inside, almost to the grass. And that startled Freddie, because he must have lifted there for a second. And when I came out on the other side, Freddie was this big, Wow. I really put a big, and he never caught up with me because I started driving like I was qualifying, and I opened up enough that they could not get on my draft, and that was my salvation. So, it was something, a sign from upstairs that that told me to do that. I had no idea, but that's what gave me the race, really.
What was your reaction when the final yellow flag came out that eventually ended the race under caution? Was it a relief, or were you still concerned about making it to the end? What was your reaction when you saw that caution flag?
Well, it was a relief, but also disappointing to some degree, because I didn't have him on my tail. I was good to go. I had a good lead on him, and you want to end the race, obviously, and there was a couple laps to go, and so it ended in a yellow, which still victory, but Freddie was far enough. You could see, if you look at the records, he was far enough. He was behind me, like, I don't know, something 18, 19 seconds. And so I was running. Like I said, I was in control of the race for sure.
What was victory lane like after the race? Was everybody very happy, or were there some people kind of iffy?
Steve, it was a bit of a mix, to be honest with you. Even the Ford folks, they would have rather had Freddie win, because Freddie was a regular. It was much more advantageous for them. He was NASCAR's golden boy at the time, And I think they were happy that I won, but didn't do much for them at the time. And the ones that gave us a nice dinner and everything else later for the team was Firestone. The Firestone group, they were really very excited about it with us. And so we celebrated, I guarantee you. we celebrated, and my team and everyone was there and enjoying, and rightfully so. I think it was a darn good race. We ran hard that day, believe me.
Once everything was said and done and you did win the race, did you ever sit down and talk to somebody about everything that had taken place, the pit stop and the engines? And if so, what were those conversations like?
Well, there was no point because I knew, it become a political thing. I didn't, there was no point in getting into that unless I would be asked, which, then I would tell my story, which the way it was. But, I know that one of the individuals was that the head of racing at the time was John Cowley. When he retired, I gave him a little zing about this, and it wasn't him that made that decision. I didn't know until later who it was. And that individual, should go unnamed because no use digging that up. But a lot of the insiders know who it was. But again, individuals like that, they just look at the interests of the company, the interests of different interests than what my particular was, and knew I was basically a one-off or so for Daytona. So, but that doesn't take away from the satisfaction that I derive for sure, by winning and winning. I felt that we won well. Racing against, David Pearson. We had quite a battle there for all day, and then and Richard and so on and so forth with icons like that, and Kalen. It was, to me, it was extremely rewarding, and it got more rewarding every year. Thinking about how great it was.
Now, you did come back and run for Holman and Moody the following year, and you did run the Daytona 500 and actually led some laps, but I believe you wound up in a crash coming off turn 4. How disappointing was that not to be able to defend that title?
Yeah, very disappointing, of course. It just, I think here again, I was trying to run a car loose, and I wasn't very forgiving, and so I know even in the kink, I had a tough time keeping it on the track in the race. But obviously, you like to repeat, or you like to be able to do it again, but it was what it was.
You ran the NASCAR season opener at Riverside in 1969, and that was it for you in NASCAR. Was there a specific point where you made the decision to not run NASCAR anymore, or were you basically just too busy running everything else at that point?
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, it's with NASCAR, that was not going to be my future at the time, because I had my feet in sports prototypes, and then my objective was to Formula One. In '68, I had my debut in Formula One, and I wanted to do more Formula One races. And I wanted to free up my time from IndyCar schedule to do some Formula One races, and which, required a lot of travel, a lot of time on my side. So that's what I was pursuing. And, I just, again, I did some USAC stock cars that, in fact, one in Canada, Kawartha 250. They're driving a Charger for who was running USAC. But anyway, I had a good time in USAC cars, because it was the same as the NASCAR, the same basic rules and so forth. And so again, I did some of those, but again, my objective was, to get more into Formula One later on and so forth. And that took up my time because that's it. I could only do so much.
Bobby and Donnie Allison and Kel Yarborough all ran the Indianapolis 500 in the early 1970s. What was the sentiment in the Indy garage about the good old boy cab drivers coming up north?
Oh, it was great. They were totally welcome with open arms, no question. I mean, that's how we developed the friendships with those guys. And I was one that encouraged that. I said, you guys, because in NASCAR, you had, a lot of the IndyCar drivers, especially coming to Daytona and so forth. And I said, why don't you guys come over on our side? And they got some decent rides, and both Allisons were there, Bobby and Donnie. And then, and of course, Cale did it. We had, I think was Leroy, I think Leroy.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, sir. I believe he did too.
Well, so, there were a couple of others. But again, I guarantee you, I from my side, I just remember, because we were all friends anyway. This is one thing that I found, guys, that by crossing over in this disciplines, after a while, sometime at the beginning, you get a little resistance, maybe, especially if you're a thorn on their side, but at the same time, then you just develop those friendships and they last forever. I can go on I'll be down there for 24 hours with Daytona this, coming up, and I can walk the garage, and I know just about probably 60, 70% of the people out there. I can go into Formula One, paddock, and the same thing, and can go to NASCAR, the same thing, and that's the way it should. That's the way it's been with me anyway. So I think it's a big, but it's also a very small world that we have in our sport, and it's wonderful that we have the different disciplines, that you can just specialize in and just satisfy your career, in just one discipline. That's the beauty about the motor racing that we have in our country. Not too many countries that can make that statement, except if you do Formula One, which is a fully international, but Australia is the only one that's got the supercars, where it's a very intense championship and so forth. And Japan's got some series, but nothing like what we have. We have the majors. We got NASCAR, IndyCar, and then IMSA, with the sports cars. So again, I think we're at a good place here.
The opportunity to run some IROC came around in 1976, and then in 1978, you won the IROC race at Daytona. How much did your NASCAR experience help with your IROC win? Well,
big time. Yeah, for sure. Any type of experience, you feel much more confident and so forth. And then knowing that also the cars are pretty close. So at least, that you have equipment that's got a, pretty good shot at being equal. So you feel it's up to you, to do it, to get the job done. So that became very satisfying. And for me, in 69, we were in 79, winning that IROC championship was really, another part that was very rewarding. I had a couple of good races. I had really a good race with Cale when I won in Atlanta, in the IROC. And so then I think I won Riverside. I won a few of those, and that made me feel quite good about, my performance with those cars.
There had been rumors for years about a NASCAR race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Were you an Indy purist, or were you fairly open to that idea?
Oh, absolutely open. It's the expansion for the sport in general is good for all of us, and I think that there's no, I certainly had no problems for that happening.
You were still racing at that point.
Yes.
Surely somebody somewhere offered you a ride for that inaugural Brickyard 400. Did they?
No,
Really?
actually not. No, I would have raced otherwise. It would have been with the right team.
Nobody offered you a ride.
Nobody. I'm still waiting. Still waiting.
What kinds of conversations did you have with your nephew John when he was thinking about going to NASCAR?
Oh, all in. I mean, John was, as you could see, very versatile. He moved around when the opportunity wasn't the way he wanted it. In IndyCar, he had something else going, and even he ran some Top Fuel, when he didn't have, any rides anywhere. And NASCAR, when he landed with Richard and when he drove for Cale and all that, he felt, like he was really, really with good equipment, and he got some good results out of it too. I loved the idea that he ran that.
Great.
John, of course, was the first to run the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 on the same day. Was that something that he had discussed with you? And if so, what did you think of the idea?
No, he didn't discuss it with me. John was his own person. I'll tell you what, he didn't ask for too many opinions. He wanted what he wanted to do, he did. And this seemed like an impossible task, obviously. But it's been tried a couple of times, and we all know, and it is a tough one. It's a tough one for many reasons, because you're splitting up your time, even in practice and so forth. So somewhere along the line, you're leaving something on the table. But from a personal satisfaction standpoint, the fact that, not too many people, have done that, it gives you something, it's again, I think it's going to happen again. I would suspect. And if it does, I mean, I'll be rooting for that individual.
What is your best John Andretti story?
Well, actually, it was great that we ran it 24 hours of Le Mans together with Michael, John, and myself with the factory Porsche. And it was one of those years, I'm going to get into it just a little bit, where it was a rule. It was a kind of a stupid fuel rule they had. There was only so much fuel that you could use for the 24 hours. And so you had to do some pacing along the way. And I got along really well with the team manager at Porsche. And he liked us again, and so we really stayed on that program, to make sure that and some of the guys that actually were running ahead of us at that point, up to 1 o'clock in the morning, they were in deficit for fuel, which means even during a pit stop or something, they would have to just stay in the pits until, because otherwise they weren't going to finish the race. It was weird rule. But about 1 o'clock in the morning, we took the lead, and we were right on schedule. And then we lost the cylinder. We went on 5 cylinders, a 6-cylinder engine, and it was an injector or something, but the engine did not seize. And we ran on 5 cylinders the rest of the race from 1 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock. And I think we finished 5th or 6th. Still, we would have won that race. But here again, with John, it was just a great opportunity. And then the other one was as a family at Milwaukee in 1992, was it? 1992, where we were, it was all Andretti podium, and Michael won, John second, and I was third.
Wow.
And and it was as a family, how could you want anything better than that? And And again, here again at Indy, you know, in 91 and 92, four Andrettis were at the Indianapolis 500, which as a family, it never happened before or since. Four members of the same family to qualify for that race. And so we all, obviously, family, you know, we're close family, but we love the fact that John was, you know, he gave so much of himself to the sport. I loved it like we all did, and he certainly carved his own, you know, his own piece there for sure. And now he's got his son Jared, you know, driving again. So, and between Aldo and I, between the two of us, the 8 of us, you know, the 8 race drivers there.
Wow.
And so Aldo and I started this mess.
I got a question I've always wanted to ask you. You have driven at Indianapolis, of course, and Daytona. You've been in NASCAR garages and you've been in IndyCar garages. Are they very, very similar, or do you ever sense a difference in, say, camaraderie or the way rules are enforced or inspections? You know, is it pretty much the same, or are there some differences?
Well, there are differences because as you say, the cars are different rules and different approach to things. But on the human side, I don't see any difference at all, quite honestly, because we're all trying to do the same thing. You know, we're all competitors. We all work hard, and I think that when there's respect, there's respect, and I think we all know that you don't achieve anything without a lot of sweat and tears. And so, you know, when I see somebody that has accomplished so much, man, you know, my hat comes off to them and all of that. And I've always felt, personally, I've always felt welcome, quite honestly. And that's the most important part.
Well, Mario, finally, on behalf of all members of the NASCAR Motorsports, of the National Motorsports Press Association, I would like to apologize to you for having to enter the NMPA Hall of Fame alongside such a hoodlum as Steve Wade.
That was one of the greatest nights of Mario's life. He told me so afterwards.
You got a good friend there, Steve.
Mario, I'm sorry,
but
man.
I'm on your side. Don't worry.
Hey, thank you, Mario.
I got your back.
I got it. I appreciate it.